Hey, hello, and welcome to Michael's Minty Music for today. Today we review Imagine Dragons' brand newly released album Loom, released just the 28th, so that was 2 days ago. It's pretty great, although I will say I am a big Imagine Dragons fan, so I am pretty biased here, but I do definitely think it's still a good album. This is the track listing, and these are the tracks I added to my playlist, which is all of them. This album's pretty great. I think it's one of their better albums, although it doesn't knock my socks off the first time I heard it the same way that some of their best work did. But it's still got some really great songs here, and in general, the songs are all pretty good, pretty outstanding, actually. None of them sound quite the same. They've all got some interesting things about them that make them all pretty unique. And while the tracks don't sound out of place amongst their last couple of albums, I think they still stand out pretty well. You can kind of tell that they cut it down to get the best, most interesting 9 tracks they had, and the quality of the album is greatly improved because of that. The flow is alright. They're missing maybe 1 or 2 more upbeat tracks and 1 or 2 more slower ballad tracks. So the speed kind of ends up coalescing around mid-speed pop-ish. There is 1 or 2 high-speed tracks and 1 or 2 ballads, but I think if they had another 1 or 2 more of each of those, that might help. But they're already at 9 tracks, so it's pretty low on the track count. There are a few harder rock tracks that do help push through, though, particularly in the middle, which definitely gets it to the end. But in the end, the total time doesn't even crack 30 minutes, so you don't really end up getting bored or anything. The flow is kind of decent, but not incredible. I will say the opening and closing tracks are both really good, though, and definitely well placed. A lot of the middle tracks could be flipped around for a better flow, but the opening and closing I think would stay. There were 2 singles released before the album, Eyes Closed and Nice to Meet You, both of which will probably be on the radio in the next couple of weeks, along with whatever 1 or 2 other tracks they release as singles. I think I've already heard Eyes Closed on the radio, actually, so yeah, definitely going to be 2 to 3 hits off of this one, is my prediction. My favorite track here is probably that last one, Fire in These Hills. It's a bit more classic Imagine Dragons than the harder rock sounds of Eyes Closed or Take Me to the Beach. I also liked Kid. It's a very interesting song, kind of divisive, I think it will be. And Nice to Meet You is probably going to be the biggest hit here. That's my prediction on that one. I rank this album 3rd out of the 7 Imagine Dragons albums they have so far. Well, they have right now. It was a little difficult to place. I definitely think it's more consistent and interesting than Origins and Mercury Act 1, but it's pretty close in quality to Mercury Act 2. I actually considered putting it between the 2 Mercury albums, but ultimately, after listening to it a few times, I think that it's a better album than Mercury Act 2. It isn't outstanding like Night Visions or Evolve, but it's very succinct, which is an improvement over Mercury Act 2, which has a similar level of quality, but there's a lot of extra songs on that one that sound the same as others on that same album. While Loom is specifically cut down to 9 tracks under 30 minutes, it doesn't have any of the sort of extra tracks that Mercury Act 2 does, with it being almost 18. It's almost double the size of Loom, and they can definitely cut that down to even 12 would be decent. Additionally, this album does take my top spot from 2024, taking away from JJ Chef's second album, Treasure, which is pretty good, but I definitely think Imagine Dragons has a lot more experience and have the higher quality album here. Plus, I'm pretty partial to Imagine Dragons. Most of their albums are my favorite from their release years, and this one's a definitely pretty good one, so yeah, it's in contention to keep this spot by the end of this year. Next up is the Beatles' 1964 album, Beatles for Sale. It's one of their early albums, so it's not as incredible as their later work, but it's still pretty good, so stay tuned for that, and as always, stay minty.